Zoser, thank you so much for coming on the show and helping to explain some of the stuff that's going on here. We have season 1 dropping in a matter of hours, right? We're about to transition over to the 14th, so it's any time within there we're going to see season 1 drop. Now, I had a couple of mixed emotions when I heard the announcement for season 1. Of course, I'm super excited to be getting the full launch of Origin, to be moving forward into the future, but at the same time, it just felt like it was coming so quickly, right? Maybe not even enough time for a balance patch in between. So I talked to you earlier at AxieCon, and you had some amazing words that immediately put me at ease. So what would you say? What would you say is going on here? Like, are we going to see anything majorly impactful before season 1 drops, or is it going to be a little bit more of the same that we've already saw?
Yeah, so I don't think anything majorly impactful is going to change. And I think that's one of the big reasons that it's important to have season one come out so early. Season one's going to be a 60-day season, right? And assuming
Right.
nothing too much is changing, especially in balancing, that means that you've had a 30-day season zero, plus some off season, plus a 60-day season one of essentially kind of the same meta, let's say. And that's obviously going to get a little bit stale. It's also going to give people a chance to really kind of like really crack the meta. But we wanted to get that underway as quickly as possible. So that way we can get on to then season two and then season three. And that's where you're going to see some really big changes. A second big part of it is just sort of in the length of a 60-day season. We haven't really seen how that worked out in Origin yet. And we know from season zero that a lot can happen at the very end.
Absolutely.
Kind of to put things in perspective, Spam and Rice, for example, held a 16-day season lead only to be overthrown in the final hour. And so I think that what that shows is that a lot of moves can happen at the very end. And I don't think it's uncommon for players to go pick up the runes and charms that they want, maybe in the final 5 days of a season, and sort of go from like a chick or a boar all the way to challenger and some of the top ranks very quickly. And so kind of what I want to say to the players to sort of alleviate some of their stress is that even though season one starts very early, it's not how you start a season, it's how you end a season. And
Right.
so I think that obviously try to get your gains in, have some fun, grind your mood charts early. But I think also rest assured that, as it gets later into a season, I think that's when it really starts to matter the most. And so they'll still be able to look forward to that end of season push and not be too stressed too early in a season, I hope.
Awesome. Awesome. Of course, a lot of people were hoping for a balance patch before we headed into the next season. Now, something that wasn't really clear to me is that even though Sky Mavis wants to reduce any balance patches like during a season as possible, there will still be bug fixes. Correct. So we will still see updates that may fix things that aren't working correctly, and even a small bug can have a huge impact. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. So for us hardcore gamers out there, we know that bugs and balance sometimes go hand in hand, like you're pointing out. A bug can actually influence the meta in certain ways.
Right.
So I want to make sure it's clear that the planet Sky Mavis has always been that during a season, that fixes should absolutely be on the table, right? So if something's not working as intended, regardless of how it's affecting the meta, if it's not working as intended, that's a bug, and we would go ahead and fix that. And that might have some small or big meta impacts. But as for actual balancing, meaning um, changing the way things are intended, it was never the goal or the plan to have those mid-season. Now, there is sort of a caveat to that, and I think there's rumors already going around, and I want to make sure to clear that up right away
Okay.
about season one and balancing. If you'd allow me to kind of spell out how that came to fruition and where we're at with this.
You've got the floor.
Awesome. So going into AxieCon, knowing that there was going to be a very small off season between season one, the plan on our end was to not do any balancing changes going into season one, therefore also meaning no balancing changes during season one, because it's really important that we don't do mid-season balancing changes. However, we get to AxieCon, and we're of course observing all the pro players. We're seeing the highest level of play. I got to do some casting with you over there, which was fun. And we saw a meta that we never really knew about, for example. The data in season zero never really got us to this meta because when you have all the runes and charms unlocked and you're watching the best players in the world play, it's a little bit of some different data points. So we realized that there were some things that probably needed to be changed. And still, we walked away from AxieCon going, it's probably better we don't do a balancing patch. It's too late. It's too risky. Well, after talking to some pro players and especially focusing on things like area of effect in terms of debuff and how they interact with rage stacks, um, we realized that it would just be too overpowered looking at the end of a season, meaning at the end of season one, we're going to see that probably close to the same meta we just saw at the BYOD tournament, and some changes are absolutely necessary. So because of the timing and us not wanting to delay season one and have it still launched, we are going to do a small balancing patch 2 weeks into the season. And we're
Oh,
going to be
okay.
as transparent as possible about what those changes are going to be. So you're going to know much earlier than 2 weeks from now. So as soon as we find out and lock some of these changes, we're going to let the community know right away what these changes are going to be. Um, Again, I do think this is mostly going to impact just what we saw at the BYOD tournament. If you're, a relatively casual player, or you're scared that this is going to change sort of the way your Axies are behaving right now, or your runes and charms, or the things you care about, I wouldn't worry too much. I really think the focus is going to be what we saw at the BYOD tournament, which again is the area of effect stuff. Some of the rage stuff, some of the stacks of rage with area of effect, with 4-turn debuff. It got pretty nasty out there. And when that's all you see, I think it's pretty
Absolutely.
eye-opening. So
A-
that's the plan for season one right now.
So, unless your name is Spam and Rice or 1437, you probably don't have to worry about it.
I think that's a pretty fair statement. So yeah, we'll
Okay,
be as transparent as
wonderful.
possible every step along the way.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, we will be getting a balance patch hopefully around 2 weeks into the season. Will we be getting any bug fixes before then, or are we going to round it all up into the same big update?
I think there's some very, very minor bug fixes that we're deploying right now. Obviously, by the time you guys see this video, you'll probably be aware of them. And if anything else needs to be addressed at any point, of course, a hot fix or bug fixes are never off the table. And that's something we should always expect throughout the course of all the seasons. Bug fixes are always a top priority.
Right.
And so those patches are never off the table for those things. Yep.
So I understand there's going to be a few other changes going along with season one, moving into the full launch of Origin. Do you want to start getting into some of those changes and the details within?
I'd love to start with some of the reward and progression changes, actually. So the main thing is, let's talk about sort of as you increase your crafting level, which should definitely be a big deal. And that's one of the main kind of milestones you have as a player in Origin, is what crafting level you're at, because that not only determines what you can craft, but also what rewards you've earned. So if we kind of look back to season 0 just in our heads as players and what we experienced, I think it was a little bit, I think the rewards were not really proportionate to where you were at with the crafting level. And what I mean by that is you hit something like crafting level 5 or 7, which, takes a good little chunk of time, right? And to be rewarded with things like, a couple common charms, I think it was a disproportionate reward. But also when all of us play through a season, we sort of know, okay, we know how it should kind of feel at certain crafting levels. We've made some changes, and I would say probably just buffs in general. I think you're going to find that every crafting level is just going to feel better as far as the rewards you get from them.
Great.
Now, the most exciting thing is we actually have this new feature. It's called Choice Box. And we're really excited to test out the waters with this for season one.
Oh,
Essentially, what Choice Box is, and I'll
yeah.
show it here to you in a sec on the screen. As an example, we could put every single rare rune into a box. So all of the whatever, however many 12 or 14 rare runes that exist in the game, we can put them into a box. We can use that box as a reward. And then when you're given that box as a choice box, you can choose which rune you want to pull out. And you'll receive that
Oh,
rune, and then the box will be destroyed. So this will
oh,
be very
Zoser.
powerful for players.
This will be
Yes.
huge. I can't tell you how many times I'm like one rune or charm away from the perfect build, and to not be able to not have access to this. I think this is going to be huge. When you're crafting naturally, right? You're relying on RNG, and you usually get a couple pieces to each puzzle. But if you have that opportunity to choose, then you can fulfill any one of those puzzles that you have incomplete. That's great.
Exactly, exactly. So, in combination with better rewards and with Choice Box, or I'm definitely looking forward to season one. These progression rewards through crafting level. We'll take a look at kind of how that works now, but just kind of as a general overview, for hitting crafting level 2, which is very happens very early in the season. We'll let anybody have a choice of 2 common charms, one common rune and one common charm, for example. Now,
Right.
moving forward, as you look down, you'll notice that every time you hit a crafting level, you'll always at least get a moon dust of sort. And I think this is really important. So More moon dusts. People want them. People are going to get them. You can't craft them anymore since season alpha. So let's make sure that every time you increase your crafting level, you're at least getting some sort of moon dust. As an example, let's actually look at crafting level 10. So crafting level 10, when you reach it, you'll be getting a epic moon dust, and then you'll also be getting a choice box that has any epic stat charm. And so I want to talk about why is it an epic stat charm and not an epic charm? Well, there is a big difference, if I may say, and I think you'll agree as a hardcore player, between something like a bubble paste
Uh-huh.
charm versus a charm of plus 18 HP.
Yes.
And those
Definitely.
bubble paste, I call them utility charms, right? Bubble paste, moon stamp, sun stamp, things that change the way you interact, your Axie interacts with the game or the buffs they provide are substantially different than a stat charm. And I just think that it would be potentially too impactful to let someone choose an epic charm. Who knows? Maybe in the future there'll be a new rarity where we can put those in because they are, I think, so much more impactful and different than a stat charm. And so when you do hit level 10, we're gonna go ahead and give you an epic stat charm of your choice, which should still be nice. These are very important. Obviously, if you have your front beast with Pangolin scale, you really want that plus 18 HP. You know, it never hurts to have the plus 10 attacks and stuff on your different Axies. So these should still be cool and feel good. But we're definitely we're gonna let bubble paste and moon stamp and sun stamp sort of be the ones that you have to craft. You're not gonna have an opportunity to just earn those in a reward. And so we'll see how that looks and feels after season one.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course the big one I can call out is crafting level 14. When you hit crafting level 14, you get to choose any epic rune you want and go ahead and take that for yourself for the
Wow.
season.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, that's amazing. Bloodlust, anybody?
Well, yeah.
That's
Anyone like
great.
Bloodlust? That's a pretty good option. Malediction's not bad either, depending. So there's some
Poison
cool ones,
touch?
and
Absolutely.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it'll make more sense why we chose level 14 pretty soon here when we look at the crafting changes we had and how the recipes unlock. But if you don't mind, I'd actually just like to share sort of what opening a choice box looks and feels like on actually the Origin test client here.
Can we
If I
do
can
that?
share my screen.
Oh,
Yeah, let's
let's
do
do
that.
it. Let's do it. Okay, great.
So Zoser level 100. Not too much to leak here. You may notice something at the top left corner that's a little different. I'll let you guys speculate on that yourself.
Ooh, okay.
But let's jump into the inventory. And this is where when you earn a choice box, it will go. So here I have a lot, okay? Because I'm on a test build. I get to test these things out. So I don't
This
think you're
this
going to be having
client,
19 or 20 choice boxes,
right.
but
This client is not live. There's no way to play this version of the game in the main servers.
correct. This is
Yes.
solely for testing to showcase it. Exactly. Let's go ahead and jump into this epic, like for example, epic stat charm we were talking about. So when you receive this, you'll receive one of these. So you'll have a one right here. So what you'll do is you'll open it as such. So you'll press open. And as you can see, here's every epic stat charm in the game. So you'll notice the attack plus sevens, you know, and for the neutral, you've got the shield stat plus 10, the bug, you've got the infamous Aqua plus 18 HP, which is just so great with Hardy Warrior. So you'll see there is no Sun Stamp, Moon Stamp, you know, Leafy Pot, Bubble Paste, things like that. So for me personally, I love my Aquas, Ryan. I'm probably just going to grab the Aqua 18 HP plus 12, right?
I don't blame you.
So assuming I only have one choice box, my amount will go to one, and that's all I'll have. I will not be able to click past one because I only have one choice box. So
Okay.
I was given this as a reward, right? Maybe through contests, maybe or as a concrete example for reaching this crafting level we just talked about. I think it was level 10. And then we'll go ahead and say collect, right? So you'll notice that I have 20 of these. When I collect it, boom, I'm gonna get it. It's now mine. It goes straight into my collection with everything else. So if I only had one, which most of you guys will get, it'll go down to zero. There'll be no more box. You've made your choice. Choose wisely.
Awesome, man. That is going to
Yeah.
be so helpful.
I think so too. And the things we can start doing with them, I talked about at AxieCon contests, for example, and what winning a contest leaderboard means. Well, we can absolutely, for example, say choice box Mystic Rune. And of course, we could put every Mystic Rune in theory in this choice box. And if you won the contest for the weekend of the week, you know, that could be a reward on the table and that would be impactful. Something I want to call out is that all of the things inside here are sealed. And just to remind you what sealed means, that means it's not mixable, right? So
Right.
these are personal choices. These will be yours to use and only yours for the season. But these are not something that you're going to be minting and potentially trading on the marketplace. Those are going to be reserved for things you craft.
So these choice boxes are not for personal profit, strictly to help you improve your leaderboard rankings on the game and hopefully get a good leaderboard
Yep.
reward at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think you nailed something earlier, which is combating RNG, right? And that's always been something that's important to us. We know the RNG system is relatively harsh. We do have some, of course, utility items in the moon dust and ancient moonstones, but in the end, it's still a pretty harsh system. And I do think Choice Box is our light, is our saving grace to help alleviate some of this RNG. So this is only the first season we're doing them. We'll try to keep improving and changing as necessary so that it feels as good as possible and the sense of progression is there.
Awesome.
Do you want to see me open
Yes,
the
I
epic rune? You want
do.
to see me open an epic rune,
Of
right?
course I
Okay,
do.
let's
Come
let's
on, let's see it.
let's open an epic rune. It's just so beautiful to see them all together, right? So I have 19 here. So obviously, I would only have one real life, so we'll pretend this has one, and here they are.
Wow.
God, there's so many tempting choices. I've even seen Heaven's Echo used, to be honest, and I got beat by it. Obviously, Rise and Rune for the players that sort of like more control and heal out there. God, what should I take? What's the play here?
I mean, so
Is it Bloodlust?
I feel like it's about half and half, right? I see Bloodlust, Poison Touch, Raven's Tactic, Rise and Ruin. Malediction's pretty decent as well. I would go for those 5. I don't know. I mean, you're an Aqua player. You already got the Aqua Charm. You got to get the Bloodlust. I think you got to do it.
All right, so I put in one. There's the Bloodlust. I think about it. I call my friends. I make sure this is what I want to do. I check the marketplace.
Right.
There's a pretty big decision. You can't undo it. And then all of a sudden, boom, and you take your Bloodlust, and there it is. It's yours for the season. It's only yours. It's sealed. And then, of course, your count goes down to 18, which in this case, it would just probably be eliminated. That would have been your only box.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for this.
Can you give an example of what one of those challenges might look like?
Yeah, we're talking about contests now, right?
Right.
The new feature kind of coming for Origin that's also going to impact sort of the whole Axie universe potentially, right?
Absolutely. I spoke to you personally and you gave me an example, but I'd love to have an example here within the podcast itself for anyone who wasn't familiar.
Sure. So when we launch contests, which is basically we're going to give players a series of missions that last anywhere from, let's say, 24 hours to a weekend to potentially a week or a few weeks, right? You're going to have these missions. You complete these missions to earn points. And then, of course, the more points you have, you're going to climb milestones. And also, there'll be a leaderboard to track who has the most points. So when the contest ends, you'll get rewards. So I guess like kind of one good example would be something like, the plant extravaganza example that was brought up, during my presentation. Where in something like this, imagine we run a week-long contest that says, hey, every time you breed a plant Axie, we're going to give you 100 points. And every time you release a plant Axie, we're going to give you 250 points. And then every time you win a battle inside of Origin and you use a plant, we'll give you, let's say 10 points. And that might stack. So if you use a triple plant team, maybe you're getting 30 points per win.
Right.
So you'll do this with all these points. And then let's say the first milestone comes out and it says, hey, for getting 100 points, we're going to let you open a choice box and it's going to have a rare charm inside of it. Cool. Now we go to the next set. Okay, for 250 points, you're going to earn yourself 1,500 moon shards. And we're also going to give you the special sealed let's say, charm. And so we might give something like that. And then for reaching 1,000 points now, it's like, okay, we're going to give you, 3,500 moon shards, and you get to pick any epic stat charm you want. And so that's kind of how the rewards will look and feel. And as you hit those in real time, you'll earn those rewards. And then when the contest ends, so at the end of the week, for example, for doing these plant-based missions, at the end of the week, it's like, hey, if you were in the top 10 of people who earn contest points for that week, we're going to give you guys all the mystic plant rune, for example.
Amazing.
Right, and that could be something like a reward. It might be themed like that, or it might just be, hey, you get any mystic rune of your choice, or you get 20,000 moon shards. Who knows what it is? But obviously, it should feel pretty good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The milestone rewards are TBD, but that's the basic layout of what it'll look like. And it seems pretty clear to me that these will be happening during season, right? Mid-season
Absolutely.
contests,
Yes.
which means that the
Yep.
meta will be shifting depending on how many people are actually, depending on how many people are going headstrong for these challenges and these contests. If we start
Yep.
seeing a lot more people play plants, we're going to see a lot more sustain. These aggro teams might not be able to keep up, which means everyone has to go for a more mid-range comp. And then when the contest ends, maybe everybody was only doing the contest to get the Aqua runes. Now Aqua's come back in full force, and we have to figure out how to combat that. So a lot more
Exactly.
intricacies and shifts in the meta just from introducing those contests. So that's a lot of fun. Wow.
Yeah. Yep.
That's amazing. Is there anything else that you want to show on screen, or should we hop back to the
There is. You
videos?
know what? There is. This is massive. Let's jump straight into it.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, Ryan, let's talk about turn order.
Turn
Okay?
order. Uh-oh.
How important is it in Origin?
Massively important. It's absolutely huge. Going first, you have a slight energy advantage, but you're actually losing out on some cards. It's very. I feel like you almost need to build an entire comp specifically going first or specifically for going second, right? It's very difficult to build a comp that works both ways.
Yep.
So I'm extremely excited because I've had a few ideas of my own in terms of how to balance this. So I don't even want to say anything. I just want to kind of hear what you say. What is?
Sure. So
Let's do it.
let's talk about how they did things at the BYOD tournament, and then I'm going to tell you that it's not actually that way, but it's close. So at the BYOD tournament, for those of you that were not there at AxieCon, it was actually kind of cool. They would walk up to the two players that were facing each other, and they would flip an actual coin, which I believe it was a euro because we were out there in Barcelona. They would flip a coin. One player would call it, and if the player who called it was correct, I believe they got to choose: do they want to go first or second, right? And so that was how they do it. Just an old school flip a coin, as a lot of sports do.
Right.
And so obviously, it's important to have that choice of first or second based on sort of that coin flip.
Absolutely.
And so here is how we are going to do it.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it's not a coin flip. I am about to find the match, and as soon as I find it, you'll see that a new UI pops up that you guys are not used to seeing. Okay, do I want to choose rock? Do I want to choose scissor? Do I want to choose paper? Let's take scissor. It's in the middle here.
Oh my
Okie
gosh.
dokie, my opponent chose paper. I win. Now I get the choice. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and go second. I want less RNG. I want more cards in my hand.
Zoser,
right?
this is great.
Battle starts, and I go second, just like we determined. And now we're off to the races.
Can I just go on a little bit of a tangent here?
Please do.
I think turn order is so massively important, right? Because like I said earlier, you can build a comp for going first, you can build a comp for going second, but you're always just going to get the one that you want 50% of the time. When you introduce that ability to choose, then you are actually going to get the optimal outcome more than 50% of the time. Because 50% of the time you'll have the ability to choose, and then the other 50% of the time they'll have the ability to choose, but it's still 50-50 whether or not they choose the one that you want. So it's almost like
I think you just nailed it.
everybody gets around 75% the turn order that they want. And I've been pushing for something like this since almost day one of Origin. To see it finally coming to fruition brings so much warmth into my heart. This is great.
Yep. I think you nailed it. I think we're doing this at a perfect time where when we're looking at the data, the win rates between player 1 and player 2 are getting very close to 50-50. In fact, this is the most balanced it's ever been. You know,
Right.
it's taken us 3 months to get to this point. At one point, it was like a 64-36 discrepancy.
Absolutely.
There's times we're going first is at a huge advantage. There's times we're second. But like you pointed out, the math works out that you have about a 75% chance of being happy. Because if you build a composition that just thrives on going second, right? You've got, let's say, all the Nemo Cottontails, and your whole thing is to make sure you draw as many cards as you can so you can have those big turns. If you are a second turn player, well, every time you get the choice, you can go ahead and take second. And then every time your opponent has the choice, they might take first, which plays into you. And then both you and your opponent are happy, where your opponent wants to go first and you want to go second, and you both were able to sort of control that. So I'm very much looking forward to this change. Yeah.
Me too. I cannot wait to start jumping headfirst into the trenches of season 1. I'm so hyped. I'm so hyped. All right. Are there any other big changes we need to talk about? Or have we hit the
Yeah, I want to talk about a little bit of the crafting changes really quickly, because there are some pretty important crafting changes here. Yeah.
Okay.
And you've got the access to that dock right now.
I'll pull that up here.
So I think the big TLDR around crafting changes this season are going to be around how early players are crafting mystics. And we learned from season 0 that some players, I should say, right? It's always going to be some, were able to craft mystics very early in the season. I think we even saw a couple mystics crafted, believe it or not, in the first 24 hours of the season, right?
Well, that's
Because of how
crazy.
impactful mystic runes are and sort of the dynamic of RNG in itself, meaning let's say you only have the recipe unlocked to craft an epic, but you happen to have a mystic moondust on you. You've actually now given yourself the chance to craft a mystic. And when you got hundreds of thousands of players crafting, there's going to be a mystic popping out, even if you don't have the mystic recipe opened up. If you kind of follow my logic here, because of how the moondusts work.
Right.
So the general thing to be aware of is that mystics are going to be crafted later in the season now. And one way we're going to achieve that is by making a new recipe called Master. Master unlocks at crafting level 14, and this is where you can start crafting mystics at the same way you used to in advanced. So it'll cost you 1,000 moon shards and 100 and a thousand moon shards for the non-Ronin, and of course for the Ronin, 1,500 moon shards and 150 SLP. And this will give you your 0.5% chance to craft a mystic. Now, what we're doing differently this season compared to last season is that you will not have the chance to craft a mystic before you get to this point. And how we do that is we don't give out any mystic moon dusts until after crafting level 14. And the Moondust Epics now no longer give you a chance to craft Mystic. So
I
now
see.
Moondust Epic, like their name suggests, only increase the Epic chance. So if you put all this together, it means that you will not get a single Moondust Mystic reward until you reach at least crafting level 14. And at the same time, that's when you can craft Mystics. So even with the best RNG, there's just no way to craft Mystics until crafting level 14. What
Absolutely.
that also means is we've actually been able to pace out some of the progression. So now you're going to open up advanced at level 8, which comes earlier than it used to. I believe it's level 10 right now on season 0. And that means you should get a little bit more progression quicker, and you'll be able to increase the chance you craft epic earlier because we kind of moved everything backwards. So if you kind of you're going to unlock intermediate at level 5, advanced at level 8. You'll see that you're going to craft epic probably a little earlier. So there should be some more epics floating around. And so, yeah, that's one of the core changes we made. Just so that, especially in combination with Disenchant, we're not seeing this, overpopulation of mystics super early in a season, which can be kind of, unfair to other players.
Absolutely, right. I mean, we were saying earlier how insanely powerful these runes and charms can be. So for somebody to have, say, an endless anger on day one, it just wouldn't be a competition at that point. They'd win every single game
Yeah.
that they play. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And of course, I think you chose level 14 to be the rank that you unlock the master crafting section, as well as being the rank that you unlock the epic choice box,
The
correct?
epic rune. Exactly, the epic rune. And so that was actually very intentional. And so kind of what that means as a player is that you've been crafting epics. You can start really crafting epics at crafting level 5. So between your crafting level 5 and your crafting level 14, you're going to be crafting hopefully a good amount of epic runes. And there's a chance you may not get the one you want. So this is a perfect RNG, combatter. By the time you unlock Master, and you can now start focusing your efforts on Mystics, which means you have a chance to craft Mystics, and I'm sure you're going to be using all your Moon Dusts here. You also get the choice to go, hey, what's the one epic rune I really want? Let's say an extra one of, or that I didn't get a craft until now. So that's definitely the logic. Yep, and you caught on to that. I think the final thing we could hone on to just very quickly is the disenchant rates.
Oh,
There
true.
there are some changes to disenchant rates, and you should have that document as well, which will be public by the time this video is out again for all of you. Um, the main thing about disenchant rates, and again, this ties exactly to our last conversation about crafting, is how quickly players can craft coming from a previous season. And what I mean by that is part of the reason people were able to craft mystics on day one, a very, very, very small amount. It was not many. It was maybe 2 mystics. But the reason that was possible was because the amount of disenchanting that was happening. And so the question on our side became, how can we make disenchanting feel good, but not be like a total game changer when a season starts? And we felt that the lever was still a little bit too much on the side of game changer when a season starts.
Right. So,
So to tone,
can
yeah,
I? So, just real quick before we get into this, I remember seeing people sharing information through Twitter and Discord, giving you like a full list of the exact amount of moon shards that you get for each disenchantment and the exact dollar amount that is probably worth
yeah,
paying for that on the market, just so you can disenchant the next season. So, is this
yeah.
sort of to combat that mentality?
I
Or do
don't
you
think
think
it's to
that
combat that
the
mentality at all.
mentality will
Yeah.
still exist? It's just not going to be as dramatic.
I think that mentality could still exist, and this was not to combat that mentality at all or react to those people. That would be, I think, a little unfair. I think
Okay.
this falls probably in the same category of just general risk taking when you're trying to, guess the future meta, for example.
Yeah.
I think to
Yeah.
me it would fall in the same category as going out and saying, "Hey, I'm going to buy 25 poison axes before season, let's say 1 or 2." Well, there's that small chance poison axes might get nerfed, so there's an inevitable risk you're taking, and I think that was
Absolutely.
the same risk that people took and are taking when they go, you know what? I'm going to buy a whole bunch of runes and charms from the market just to disenchant. Well, they know it's on the table that the disenchant rates may change, and that's sort of a calculated risk. The
Yeah.
good news for these players is that they still do get an advantage in the next season, right? I think besides Axies, the one advantage you can bring season over season is, of course, some moon shards that come from Disenchant. It's just that it's not going to be as high as an advantage. There's now going to be diminishing returns. So how this looks, just to be clear, is that when you disenchant runes during a season, meaning I craft a season 1 rune and I want to disenchant that rune during its active season, we haven't touched that at all. You're still going to get the same amount you did last season.
Okay.
So that's still quite high in comparison. So this works well in case you pull a rune that you really don't want. You don't really feel like minting it and trading it to your friends or whatever, but you're like, I just want the moon shards for it. That's still going to feel pretty good. Now, what we have changed, for example, is when you disenchant an expired rune or charm. So when you bring in all of your runes and charms from season 0, right, later on this evening or whenever season 1 starts, and you do want to disenchant those, you are going to see a reduced rate from that.
Okay.
So, yep,
And
that's kind of where we're at, and we're going to see how that feels and kind of look at the data, of course.
yeah, definitely. So it looks like here for season 1 disenchantment rates. So disenchant during a season for a mystic rune. Say if you, for example, craft a shady exchange and decide you don't want it. So during the season, you'll be getting back 10,000 moon shards and 1,000
Yep.
SLP. Now for
Yes.
an expired rune, for the exact same rune, Shady Exchange, but it has been expired for 1 season. You'll be getting 1,250 moon shards back and 125 SLP. So that is almost equivalent to a mastery craft.
Yep. Even a little less. So it's gonna be, yep. So you're gonna need a lot of runes in there. Again, the impact just isn't gonna be as high. And so yeah,
Absolutely.
people are gonna have to definitely reevaluate and be careful like how they go about, let's say purchasing runes and charms from the market just for disenchanting next season. But it's still it's still it's still one of the few advantages you can bring into a new season, right? We're not doing this isn't like a Diablo ladder reset where everybody starts from 0 and there's no way around it. There is a small way around it, and it comes in the form of disenchanting. So,
Definitely. Now, can I ask? Now, this is a question I've heard floating around quite a bit. Why is it that we can carry the craft? We can carry the runes and charms. We can carry the runes and charms over from season to season, but not necessarily the materials. So, and the idea I've always had is, well, if we allow moon shards to carry over, then that will open up the door for people to start creating bot accounts to bot up moon shards, right? And then that becomes a secondary market as well, selling these alt accounts with lots of moon shards on them. So I figured the reason why is just to combat that specific occurrence. But if there's any other reasons, I'm sure they'd be very welcome.
no, I think it's generally the same principle as disenchant. It's just to stay true to the fact that when a new season starts, everybody starts, relatively fresh and new. Everybody starts kind of from 0. Of course, there are players that finish challenger, of course, progress much quickly earlier in a season, like most games. They're gonna get to the next ranks quicker because of the win bonus. Players that had a huge collections of rune and charge from the season 4 are gonna get a nice little edge when it comes to disenchanting and crafting. But I think even if there was a world where you could carry moon shards over, I think they would be, probably brought down at the same rates as Disenchant. So meaning if there was
Yes.
ever a world where we allowed 10,000 moon shards to carry over, well, if you had 10,000 moon shards, you would probably only see like the same proportionate rate, like, maybe 1,000 moon shards would carry over.
Right.
So we're basically just saying, hey, instead of just carrying them over, please just go ahead and craft them into stuff. And then at that point you can disenchant and take those kind of assets with you.
It's just a encouragement to have fun with your resources. It's not about hodling this one. It's about enjoying the
Yes.
game.
Spend your moon shards. That was the primary motivating factor in the changes for season zero. In the video I talked about, almost a month ago now before we launched season zero, was like I was not a big fan of this like stress to hoard moon shards and hoard 10,000 moon shards just so you can go for one huge craft because you got to buy all these utility items, and then you get in this trouble where like if you don't craft what you wanted, then you feel like you made a bad decision hoarding that much. And then if
Absolutely.
you and then if you don't hoard and someone else pulls what you wanted, you're like, I knew holding was the play. I got to make sure I always save 10,000 moon shards. That's the only way to craft. I think a lot of the stress and decision making has been alleviated now. You get moon shards, you use them. You don't got to think about it. And now with the addition of choice boxes and seeing how that develops season over season, again, this is just the first season we're doing it. I think we open a lot of feel good opportunities up. So, yeah.
I I I couldn't agree more. I think these are a lot of good changes. I'm really excited to see how they get implemented. Do you have any predictions? Do you have any ideas of what you think is going to be fairly meta, or can you not even say? I think you
I
have.
think I don't know. I think that's sort of it's fun to watch how the progression happens over the course of a season, right?
Right.
Because I think you and I both agree that I don't think anyone's going to come out on day one and try to be running, the endless anger AOE type of builds we saw at the BYOD tournament,
No,
right?
no,
Those are
no.
heavily dependent, I think it's fair to say, on runes and charms, right?
Absolutely. Right.
So that's sort of fun is you have players have to refresh their mind again and kind of go backwards 30 days and go, hey, what was working at the beginning of season zero, right? And things that work at the beginning of a season sometimes don't work at the end of a season and vice versa. And so sort of building your compositions around not only the runes and charms you have access to, but what's sort of viable because of what other people have access to, I think is really fun. And so
That I mean
yeah, I
that
don't I
that
don't have any predictions, but I do know what comp I'll be running early in the season, so keep an eye out for me.
Definitely, definitely. I think I'll probably be running with some sort of curse variation. One of the things I really like, to mirror what you said, yeah, absolutely. Uh, I think that's one of the funnest aspects of the game is constantly being able to crack the meta. And it doesn't have to do with just what's the best. Like you said, it has to do with what's available, what other people are playing, what's popular as well. But one of the things I think is really cool for the early season is you don't really have to worry about powerful runes and charms. When you are theory crafting later season, of course you're gonna need like, okay, I need this razor blade on my chubby, right? That's 5 potential points. And of course I want max out HP because I'm using pangolin scale. So we're just gonna go pure beast for the max potential points. Early season, right, we don't really have anything that takes up more than 1 or 2 potential points. So you can actually go as chop suey as you want and go with some crazy combination of body parts. Say for curse teams, for example, you could have like Sleepless on the eyes, Unko on the horn, and Goda on the mouth. 3 cards from 3 different classes, and because you're not having to worry about all these powerful runes and charms, they work together great.
Exactly. Could not agree more with that assessment.
Well, thank you again so much, and I hope we get to do this again next time because this has been great.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
awesome.
much better than me talking to a video by myself, so I appreciate this conversational style.
And hey, this is the first time we've ever done this together, so it's only going to get better from here.
True, true.